to the Church of Jesus Christ. Welcome to your refuge. I hope and pray that you can undo, turn off everything else and just focus on the things of God. It's not an easy task. I say that as a request, understanding that not that it's impossible, but it's nearly impossible. All that goes on in our lives, some of the things that dominate our thoughts and our minds, I understand. So it's a request, certainly, God forbid, not a demand, but I would ask if you can, rest your mind, rest your spirit, rest your soul, just so that you can receive. I sent a text out this morning to someone in need and said something to that effect. There's times just to receive. And so I hope and pray, if in fact I'm able to voice the Lord's message and not my own, that it'll have that effect. So that's my prayer. As Sister Betty was praying, that was my prayer. Lord, get me out of the way and put yourself in the way of all of this, that your word might be spoken today. And then our sister was praying just that in her prayer as I was praying the same in my mind. So I'm thankful for that. And let's hope now we can accomplish that and give the Lord his due. So the message this morning is, what's the point? How's that for an uplifting message? What's the point? I say that with cynicism laced. I'm not sure if that's a phrase, but I try to, I have no dramatic training, but this is my dramatic attempt to trick you into the message and trick you into the purpose of the message. So the message this morning is, what's the point? Yesterday I was cutting the grass. Last night I was cutting the grass at 8 p.m. I said to Candace, it had cooled down, and I said, do you think the grass needs cut? Because we've had rain and the heat has been so bad, the grass, I don't think it's had the courage to grow. It's been so hot. I don't want to get any taller because it'll burn more. So the grass has been hindered in growth. And so I said, do you think the grass needs cut? And in a really gentle way, which means yes, by the way, the short answer is yes. She said, well, it could get cut. And so I knew, I need to get out there and cut the grass. So at 8 o'clock, I went out to cut the grass. And I told her this morning, I always listen to something on tape, some book or something on tape. So I started with, and this will be, I don't know if we have any English teacher. I think Leah might be an English teacher, but I don't think for children. So I was listening to Beverly Cleary. And if you teach little children, that name will at least stir you. And I was listening to, probably for the fifth time in my life, The Mouse and the Motorcycle. So I'm starting to listen to this book that was great when I was 8 years old, this book that was pretty good when I was 12 years old, this book that was really sophomoric when I was probably in my 30s, and I read it for the third time. So at 8:30 at night, in your 60s, it just doesn't have the same impact. So I turned Beverly Cleary off. Forgive me, Beverly Cleary, wherever you are, but it just wasn't working for me. And I put on Max Lucado, and I began to listen to this beautiful book on prayer. And I told Candace, it had no effect on today's message, and everything has an effect on every message, but I didn't bring that forward, but it felt like it was for me, and I felt like my soul was being fed, and it was quite lovely for me. And having said that, I now pray the same for you, that maybe if this is God's message, it'll have a similar effect for you, that your soul might be fed. Having said that, our message is, what's the point? So you're going to have to hold for a moment to see, what does that mean? Because it doesn't sound very enticing spiritually. So we better wait and see exactly what he's talking about. I was thinking this morning, I wish I could go back and interview those that we've lost. I remember the first time I lost someone significant. I'll just say that. I don't want to name names. I just remember the first time I lost someone significant. And I thought to myself, and I'm not a Star Trek person, My brother was, so it was in the background. But I remember that Spock used to do something. I think he used to put his hand on either their heads or on their shoulders or something. And he did some kind of mind meld thing where he could take the mind of the other person, or at least read the mind, something. But I remember thinking, oh, if only I could have done that before we lost this particular individual and gain from before we lost them, at least all that they had gathered in their lifetime. And so having said that, wish I would have interviewed some of the significant people that I've lost in my life. And if so, I think the ideal time to gather that information, certainly along their life, continue to listen to them. But if I was going to sit and interview them, it would be in their last moments, in the throes of their contemplation, when they start to think about everything, when they start to think about what is this life about? What is the purpose? For what cause is life? Or what's the point? And that's what I wish I could have asked each of them. What would a man who had lived his life playing sports, trying to build a business, seemingly stirred in every direction, who gave himself to the Lord in the last 10 years of his life? And as I've often said, I saw a tremendous conversion and change in this man. What would he have told me was the point of this life? What would my mother have, that was my father, by the way, what would my mother have said the point was? What would Candace's uncle, Paul Palmieri, have told me in his last moments, the purpose of life? Her father, Candace's father, Candace's mother. And I started to enumerate all the people I've lost and all the people that have passed. I think of the beautiful dream that Larry Morocco had about his father, Brother Dominic, when he came and visited after he had passed. And Larry begged him to stay on earth and care for his family. And Dominic said, even if I could, I wouldn't come back. What must it be like for someone to make such a statement? I don't want to go. I want to be really clear on this. I understand what awaits, and I'm excited about what awaits. But yesterday we had our 3 grandchildren spend the night with us. We had an overnight with them, a sleepover as they called it. Courtney began to shoot us texts and pictures the night before as they were excited and packing, and it was just so fun. And then the 3 of them landed on our doorstep, and we had them for 24 hours, and it was glorious. So I don't want to go. I'm enjoying this life, and this life is hard. I want to be really clear about this. This life is hard, but I don't necessarily want to, I'm not in a hurry to go. Maybe that's a better way to say this. So having all those kind of thoughts stirring, what would someone facing that with the certainty that all of this is imminent, what would they tell me? What would they tell you? What would they tell us is most important? What's the point? Well, I didn't do those interviews. I didn't gather that information. I didn't ask those questions. So we have to go with what we have. And there are some that I jotted down before the service. We have some insight. We have King Benjamin's address. And he says at the start of this, he's saying these words because soon he will be leaving this earth. And so I lean in. I think, what's he going to say? Well, he didn't disappoint. The words were magnificence. A man in his final days of life thinks differently than a 20-year-old, thinks differently than a 40-year-old, thinks differently than a 64-year-old who still believes, I have a lot of life left, knowing nothing, but I still believe that. So I haven't yet stopped to really pause and contemplate. Though Candace will tell you, a lot of my comments are in that direction, thinking about life in the rear view mirror versus life in the forward mode, in the windshield. Then we have Alma speaking to his sons. Fabulous. Incredible. bringing them to the Lord, making certain that those things that they were doing right, they continued to do. Those things they were doing wrong, they corrected. Knowing that there's nothing more important. And so Alma's words are tremendous. And then he even addresses the state of the soul after death. So all you can see where the mind is at that stage of life. So that's another great account to look at. The prophet Abinadi, knowing, in fact, he stops them from taking his life. Don't touch me. If you touch me, the Lord will intervene. And the guard stepped away. And then Abinadi addresses their condition, their lacking, their poor condition. It's fabulous. So you have a couple, none more significant than Jesus Christ. If you read his last words, and they're there, you can go to the teen chapters of John, and you really capture them really well. In those chapters, you find a man who is really thinking through, truly thinking through what's important. You even see some frustration, at least I do, and see some frustration in his words. And he says, if I've been with you so long and you still don't understand this. So he is in last moments trying to make sure his disciples grasped that which was most important. What's the point? He was trying to explain to them what the point of life was. All of that as an introduction to our message today. There is a man that is the son of, and he's the son of probably a better known name from the Old Testament. There are certain patriarchs, certain heroes, certain stories. I only paused because of Sister Patty. I want you to know there are certain stories told in the Old Testament. I have to add her disclaimer, all of which are true accounts, not just stories, but there are certain stories told in the Old Testament of a man named David. And so David will probably make the top 5 of most people's lists of favorite personalities, favorite individuals from the Old Testament, maybe even from the Word of God. Some for the things he did wrong, many for the things he did wrong, some for the things he did right. If you read Psalms, and most believe he is the author, if you read Psalms, you see a man who has failed countless times because he's often begging for the mercy of God, has a clear understanding of the mercy and grace of God. And the people who have a clear understanding of the mercy and grace of God are people who depend upon the mercy and grace of God. So the son of David is not overlooked, but I don't think he's given his due. And he's one of my all-time favorites, and probably yours as well, especially when I say his name. Solomon was known for his wisdom, but I want to walk you through the account of Solomon so you understand not just what, but the why of who Solomon was. So I'm going to first go to 2 Chronicles, the first chapter, where it begins. With this in mind, this is still just the introduction to our message today. 2 Chronicles, the first chapter, the 7th verse says this. God, speaking to Solomon, asks him this question, or makes this statement. Ask what I shall give thee. Now, I want you just to pause and consider, you're in your home praying. You're on your back patio praying. You're in wherever you find your peace. Brother Dwayne would be in a field, obviously, or in the forest walking. And you would stop and pause and ask God to communicate with you. And he turns back to you and gives you a blank check. And it says this, ask what I shall give thee. Can you imagine? Publishers Clearinghouse used to send me, not that I was special, you get these too, send me invitations for wealth. And I would fill them out and send them back. What can I give you? Give me just one good hit from Publishers Clearinghouse. Who knows what foolishness I would spew? I actually stopped doing that out of embarrassment, thinking, God has blessed me. Why am I still filling these out? God has been so good to me. But that's the foolishness of man. What we think we want, what we think we need. So what would we answer to that statement? Picture, Candace, that you're in your backyard. You're watering your plants and you're at your garden, and you hear the voice of God say to you, ask what I shall give thee. Can you imagine that? Solomon answered this, and it's found in 8 through 10. He says, thou, I'm going to try to make it so that we understand the language. So I'm going to say you. You have showed great mercy unto David, my father. You've made me to reign in his stead. He's identifying the goodness of God in his life. Now, O Lord, let your promise unto David, my father, be established, for you have made me king over a people, like the dust of the earth in multitude. Like the dust of the earth in multitude. That's the blessings. What he's saying is, you've given me all of this. How? And now you're asking me what else you can give me? My life is blessed, said Solomon. My life is blessed beyond anything I can measure. Like the dust. Here's his answer. Give me now wisdom and knowledge, that I may go out and come in before this people. Who can judge this? Your people, thy people, that is so great. How can I be made king? The blessings you've given me are too many to enumerate. How can I judge them? How can I reign over them? How can I do this without your knowledge, without your wisdom? Lord, just give me an understanding to fill this responsibility. That's what Solomon said. God said to Solomon, directly behind this, 11 and 12, God said to Solomon, because this was in your heart, because this was in thine heart, and thou hast not asked riches, thou hast not asked wealth, thou hast not asked honor, nor the life of thine enemies, no vengeance, no anger in your heart, neither have you asked for long life, but you have asked wisdom and knowledge for thyself, that thou mayest judge my people. This is what God is saying to him, that you might judge my people, meaning I understand the pureness of your heart. I see what you're saying, Solomon, whom I have made the king, who I have made thy king. Wisdom and knowledge is granted unto thee. Think of that. What is it you ask? I want wisdom and knowledge. And God responds, wisdom is and knowledge is granted unto thee. Now, I don't know what happened. I mean, it sounds pretty wise even in the question. Sounds knowledgeable even in the question. But did something go in his head in that moment? Did his heart burst in that moment? As God says that to him, wisdom and knowledge is granted unto thee. I'm picturing a magic wand. Poof. Or I'm picturing in England, the sword coming down on his shoulder. I knight thee. Wisdom and knowledge is granted unto thee, and I will, listen, he didn't ask for this, and I will give thee riches and wealth and honor, such as none of the kings have had before thee, neither shall there be any after thee have the like. No one will ever be more blessed in even the natural things that you didn't ask for. And I think of what Jesus Christ said 1,000 years later, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added. Solomon lived that. Didn't do it to receive, did it because his heart was pure, and God said, you were seeking what was right. And because of that, because you're a good steward of my spirit, I give you even more than you asked for, because you can handle this. That's our hero today. Okay. Again, this is just introduction to where we're going. One of the books that's accredited, I guess, to Solomon for writing is Ecclesiastes. And I lean in on that too. He calls himself the son of David in the first verse. So we know as the son that this is who is writing this. So I'm just going to ask you to trust me on this one, that Solomon is the author of Ecclesiastes. He starts Ecclesiastes 1, and I'm going to read you the beginning of Ecclesiastes. We're going to jump through to everything. There is a season. You know, we love that the big chapter, the big starring chapter is, I think it's the third chapter of Ecclesiastes, about the seasons of life. We're skipping all of that. We're going to do the beginning and we're going to do the end, because we're talking about a man who was just given wisdom and knowledge. And if you read Ecclesiastes, you're going to find, and if you read the history of Ecclesiastes, you're going to find, and if you look into the background of Ecclesiastes, you're going to find that he wrote this just before he passed. And so we're back to start. This is our interview with one who is about to leave this earth. And he's starting to think about everything that's important and everything that's not. Everything that we should focus on and everything that we should not. He starts by saying this, and they identify him. The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. And again, I submit to you, this is Solomon who's writing. Here's his first words in Ecclesiastes. First words uttered. Vanity of vanities, said the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. Preacher, tell me, what is this life? It's all vanity. It's all spent on all the things that are unimportant. It's filling out clearinghouse forms and sending those in. It's chasing things that are less important. It's chasing things that will feed your natural side, feed your ego, feed your self-importance, and you think they're important. Vanity of vanities. All is vanity. What profit hath a man of all his labor which he taketh under the sun? When you take an accounting of everything you've done in your life, is what he's saying. Listen to the thoughts of someone who's ready to leave this life. What profit hath man? One generation passes away and another generation comes, but the earth abides forever. Sorry to be so dark, by the way. Sorry to be so dark with this message. But what he's saying is, and we pass away and another one comes behind us and the earth just keeps going on. I think Robert Frost said, in all of my life, I've learned little, but that which I've learned is this: life goes on. Remember when my father passed away and I heard a horrible sound outside. Shocking sound. It shook me to my core. My neighbor next door was cutting his grass. And I thought, how disrespectful. How can you go on and do these mundane things when my hero has just died? Solomon says it different. One generation passes away, another generation comes, and the earth abides forever. The sun also rises and the sun goes down and hasteth to his place where he arose. And the sun abides forever. The wind goes toward the south and turns about unto the north. It whirls about continually, and the wind returns again according to his circuits. And the wind abides forever. One generation passes and another one comes behind it. And the wind keeps blowing. And the man next door keeps cutting his grass. That's what Solomon's saying. All the rivers running. I'm not going to keep reading. You understand where Solomon's going with this. He's just saying that it just keeps going on. This man, who is the single most powerful man, is writing probably from his bedroom. All this power. And he's writing that as I take an account of everything, none of this matters. The wind's going to keep blowing. The sun's going to keep rising. I'm going to go to my grave. Someone else is going to come behind me. And the man next door is going to cut his grass. What's the point? I would just tell you, read that first chapter. It's magnificent. And I also will tell you this, I don't think it's counted magnificent. I think we skim past it trying to get to 3. I'm a reader who reads to finish a book too often. I can't wait to finish the book. And when I do, I'm like, my friends are gone. Why did I rush through this book? All my favorite people are gone. These were all my friends and now it's over. So I'm one who reads to accomplish, and it's not the way to read. So stop, take a deep breath and read the first chapter of Ecclesiastes and see if you don't see the wisdom of a man, maybe sitting in an open window, contemplating life, understanding life and the important things of life. Jumping to Ecclesiastes 12, I hope you'll join me. So now I'm just going to tell you, you can fill in. I mean, Ecclesiastes is a good book to read this week. If you want a homework assignment, read it. It's wonderful. So I'm jumping those next chapters, even the season chapter. Yes, even that one. Jumping over it. Ecclesiastes 12. In the 8th verse, he revisits something powerful. Here's what he says in the 8th verse of the last chapter. 11 chapters later, he's coming to the conclusion, and he's also coming to the conclusion of his life. What does he write? Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. All is vanity. As he sits and contemplates and considers what life is, he said, it's all in vain. Unless it's not. Because he's about to answer the question, what's the point? What's the point, preacher? What's the point? The wisest, most knowledgeable man ever? Then tell us the point. I missed my chance with Paul Palmieri. I missed my chance with Dennis Morocco. I missed my chance with my mother to ask this question. So let me come to you, Solomon. The wisest, most knowledgeable, richest man in the world. What do you have to say about what the point is? Verse 13 and 14, this is how he closes this glorious message to mankind about what's the point. And he even announces it as such as he writes his verses. He announces it as what's the point. Listen to this. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Do you understand what he's saying to you? 12 chapters later, beautiful verses of not meandering, but philosophizing. He comes to this point, the end of this writing, and says this, let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. What's the point? Fear God and keep his commandments. Fear God and keep his commandments. For this, listen to this, for this is the duty of man. I wish you could feel from the top of my head to my legs, the goosebumps running up and down my body right now. What's the point? I have the point. If that's your question today, what is life about? I have it for you. And it's directly from Solomon. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God Keep his commandments, for this is the duty of man. For God shall bring every work into judgment. And with every secret thing, whether it be good or whether it be evil. There is an accounting, and it awaits all of us. I thought of that fear God, and I thought of the interpretations of fear God. I don't cower from that. I don't cower from his wrath. I thought of that, and I don't mean to embarrass. And I thought immediately, I fear Candace. And not her wrath, not her anger, far from it. I fear seeing what I feared I would see in my mother's eyes. I learned the fear of God through my mother. I was making bad decisions in my life. I have grandchildren in this room, so I'm not going to define the bad decisions I was making. But I was at a party and I was given an option to say yes or no. And I remember this as clear as it was yesterday. Maybe because I've repeated it so many times, but I think because it was so significant in my life. And given that choice in that moment, I had said yes multiple times before that moment. It was just another Friday night, another moment to escape from what was going on in my life at the time. And as this option was being handed to me, and I had to decide yes or no in the moment, I thought of my father. And I negotiated his wrath. I remember thinking, is this worth a beating? And all the times before, my answer was yes, I'll trade it in. And I partook. But this night, as that option was handed to me, I thought a different thought. And I understood the fear of God as I thought that, because I was considering the fear of Letty, my hero, my spiritual rock, the person who loved me unconditionally. I thought, is this worth seeing disappointment in her eyes if she should find out? And for the first time, as a 14-year-old, I said no. Someone else. The fear of God to me is what I consider would be disappointment in his eyes. If I should do something to cause disappointment. And I suggest that to all of you. Because long before you get to his throne, long before you get to the judgment seat when Jesus will judge us, long before that moment, you will have asked forgiveness for all these things that are happening right now. And those things you don't ask for, he says, you're forgiven for. My grace is greater than your sin. So we're not negotiating the wrath. We're negotiating the disappointment in the eyes of the Father. Fear God. Keep his commandments. Imagine the difference of seeing him smile upon you. Proud. This is my beloved Son, in whom I'm well pleased, said the Father about the Son. Could you imagine hearing those words concerning your behavior? This is my beloved Son, in whom I'm well pleased. This is my beloved daughter, in whom I'm well pleased. Fear God. Keep his commandments. Jesus Christ was asked the question, a trick question. Don't ever miss this point. The Pharisees huddled together, said, "We've got to get him." They grouped together. I think of a court case, and all the attorneys around the table, and then they send someone up. So he or she is speaking the voice of 10, not just one. They've grouped together and they send this man forward, and he said, "I have a question for you. Which is the most important commandment?" And I picture the others getting ready with they're going to write everything he says down. Here we got him. And I often say this. I'm not going to assume, but many people often think, which of the 10 commandments is he going to name? But we know this. The 10 commandments represented 600 plus laws. So when he said, which is the greatest, his reference was 600 plus. If you want to do your homework, look up mitzvos. That's what the laws were called. I don't want anyone doing that homework. You got Ecclesiastes to read. Just you're gonna have to trust me on this one. And Jesus answered succinctly, quickly, confidently, assuredly, love God. One of the writers, I think it's Mark, expounds on what he said. Love him with all your heart, your soul, your spirit, and your strength, or your mind and your strength. The 4 quartiles of good health. Love him in every way possible. Love God. Maybe some of them dropped their pens. Maybe they knew they were defeated immediately. And he had the answer right. He could have stopped there, but he went on. And he said in another one that's as important as this one. Love one another as you love yourself. With all, as Mark says, with all your heart, your mind, your soul, and your strength. Give him everything. Give them everything that defines love. Fear God, keep his commandments. I know that we go back and forth on what righteousness is. I just struggle with that we always answer that as a what question. What is righteousness? And then we start to list behaviors maybe mentally, and that's okay. Intellectualize the behaviors, that's okay. But I think there's a source prior to that that defines righteousness better, and it answers the why. Why righteousness? Why? Love God, love one another. I believe this. If we love as Jesus Christ intended, there is not a sliver of space for sin. Not one sliver of space for sin. If I truly love God with all my heart, with all my soul, with all my mind, with all my strength, where does sin fit in? If I love you with all my heart, all my mind, all my soul, all my strength, where does sin fit in? Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of man. For God shall bring every work into judgment with every secret thing, all those good things you did that no one noticed. All those good things you did in secret, all the goodness you did writing a card, maybe you didn't even sign it. Sister, I just want you to know you're loved. All the things you did in secret. Don't think to the negative, think to the positive. Whether it be good or whether it be evil, it'll all come forward in that moment. What's the point? Fear God. Keep his commandments. Nothing else is important. May the Lord bless each one of you.